What happens when power meets silence until one voice dares to speak? A routine traffic stop, a powerful senator, and a silent witness with a phone unfold into a story that changes the course of justice for an entire nation. This isn't just a story about power, it's about what happens when someone refuses to look away. The clock had crept past 12:47 a.m. when Senator John Kennedy finally pulled onto Redwood Highway, a winding two-lane stretch cutting through the thick pine forests of southern Oregon. He was behind the wheel of a rented dark gray sedan, the kind you forget the moment you step out of it. Remarkably quiet and efficient. The day had been a marathon of panels, press briefings, and endless handshakes. Kennedy was in Medford for a judicial reform summit, and while he was no stranger to long days, the fatigue in his shoulders that night felt deeper, heavier. His tie was off, the top button of his shirt undone, and he looked more like a traveling salesman than a U.S. senator, but that suited him just fine. The air outside was cool and damp, thick with coastal fog rolling inland. The headlights barely cut through the mist, and the streetlights were few and far between. Ahead lay only darkness and the occasional reflective glint of road markers, vanishing under his tires. In that stillness, the hum of the engine became its own kind of lullaby, a steady, rhythmic reminder that, for now, he was alone. No cameras, no aids, just the road and the trees. Kennedy didn't speed 62 miles per hour. Cruise control set. Both hands at 10 and 2. Years in public life had taught him the cost of carelessness on and off the road. His mind wandered, replaying pieces of the summit, a heated exchange over federal oversight, a young law student's pointed question about prosecutorial bias, good discussions, hard truths. He thought about the letter he received last week from a constituent, an Iraq vet who had been stopped and searched 3 times in 6 months. No record, no apology. Kennedy had folded that letter and kept it in his inside coat pocket. It was still there, pressing lightly against his chest. He didn't see the patrol car right away. It emerged from the tree line like a shadow, with teeth, no sound. No warning until the flash of red and blue lights erupted behind him. Slicing through the fog like a flare, reflex kicked in. Kennedy's eyes dropped to the speedometer, still locked at 62. No swerve, no missed stop sign, nothing. His brows drew together. That can't be for me, he thought. He checked his mirrors. The cruiser was close now, hugging his bumper. The lights strobed rhythmically, urgent but silent. The siren hadn't started. Not yet. Kennedy let out a slow breath, his jaw set. He flipped the turn signal and eased the car onto the narrow shoulder, gravel crunching softly beneath the tires. He shifted into park, left hand on the wheel, right hand on his thigh. Classic protocol. This wasn't his first roadside pullover. He respected law enforcement, always had, working with them often, both in Baton Rouge and Washington. But something about the stillness in the air tonight felt charged. The patrol car remained parked behind him, its headlights beaming into his rearview like interrogation lamps. No movement. Seconds passed, then 30 more. Still, no one approached. Kennedy adjusted the mirror, trying to catch a glimpse. He couldn't see much, just a faint silhouette behind the wheel. The delay was odd, almost deliberate. He glanced down at his watch. For minutes passed before the driver's door finally creaked open and a figure stepped out slowly, like he was in no rush to explain himself. Kennedy didn't know it yet, but this wouldn't be a routine stop. Not tonight, not on this highway, and not with Officer Wade Perry behind the badge dot. The footsteps didn't echo. They pressed into the silence like a warning. Senator Kennedy watched through his side mirror as the figure moved closer. The officer's build was average, but his walk carried the kind of swagger that came from unchecked authority. One hand rested on his belt, the other swung a flashlight, its beam slicing through the fog like a blade. Gravel crunched beneath. His boots with slow, deliberate steps. The light snapped into Kennedy's eyes before he could speak. License and registration. The officer barked. No introduction, no greeting, not even a good evening. Kennedy squinted against the harsh beam, holding up one palm slightly to block the glare. "Evening, officer," he said calmly, voice steady and practiced. "May I ask what this stop is about?" The light didn't waver. "License, registration," the man repeated, slower this time, each syllable clipped like a warning. His jaw moved with a slow, aggressive chew of gum. Kennedy kept his voice measured. "Of course. I'll need to reach for my wallet. It's in the center console." The officer gave no verbal permission, just stared, moving deliberately. "Kennedy, kept his left hand on the wheel while his right hand slid slowly to the console. He opened it, retrieved his wallet, and pulled out his driver's license, and next to it, a sleek card bearing the seal of the United States Senate. He held both out through the window. The officer took a step forward, lowering the flashlight, just enough to glance at the ID. His expression didn't change, not even a flicker of recognition. "Senator, huh?" he said flatly, his lips curling, but it wasn't a smile. "Don't mean much out here, especially not one from D.C. Kennedy raised an eyebrow. "It's Senator John Kennedy, Louisiana. I'm in Oregon for official business. Again, may I ask what the issue is?" The officer's eyes narrowed slightly, then moved back to Kennedy's. "Step out of the vehicle." That was when the shift happened, not in volume, but in tone. The air around them grew heavier, tighter. Kennedy felt it in his chest, a quiet charge, like static before a storm. "I'd like to understand why," he replied, voice still calm, but firmer now. "There's been no citation, no explanation. I've complied fully. Step out of the car." The officer leaned closer, his breath fogging the window. Kennedy stayed seated. "Officer, with respect, I'm asking for a supervisor. This is an unusual stop. Let's not escalate." The officer took a half step back. Then came the click. It was faint, but unmistakable, the soft mechanical snap of a holster unclipping. His right hand hovered over the firearm at his side. That sound, the click, wasn't loud, but it hit harder than any shout. Kennedy didn't flinch. His pulse quickened, but his hands remained steady. His voice dropped to a tone few people ever heard from him. "I've cooperated. I've identified myself. If there's a reason for this, I deserve to hear it." The officer's eyes were darker now, unreadable. "I don't need to explain myself," he muttered. "You actually do," Kennedy replied, steel now lining his voice. "As a public servant wearing that badge, you are required to state a lawful reason for this stop and any request to remove me from this vehicle. That's not me pulling rank, that's the law. You think you can lecture me?" The officer snapped. His jaw clenched. "I said, get out now." The flashlight shook slightly in his hand. Kennedy held his gaze. "And I'm telling you, this is a mistake, one that could cost you your badge, your pension, maybe more. Take a breath. Think this through." A long silence stretched past between them, just the distant rustle of leaves and the low rumble of an engine idling behind. For a split second, Kennedy thought it might de-scale it. Then the officer reached for the door handle. Kennedy moved quickly. His left hand shot out and locked the door from the inside. His voice cut through the tension like a gavel. "Step back from the vehicle, now." The officer froze, stunned not by force, but by tone. Kennedy's words weren't shouted, but they carried the weight of someone who had stood before presidents, prosecutors, and press rooms filled with cameras. "You're out of line," Kennedy continued. "You're threatening an elected official with no cause on camera. If there's anyone watching, this isn't going to go the way you think." The officer didn't move, but his hand had twitched on the grip. Kennedy saw it, and he knew, in that moment, the next 10 seconds could change everything. The officer's fingers were tightening around the door handle when a voice, clear, sharp, and entirely unexpected, rang out from across the road. "I'm filming this." Kennedy's head didn't turn, but his eyes flicked to the left, catching the source. In his periphery, a woman stood near a parked hatchback, maybe 30 feet away, holding up her phone. The flash was on, recording everything. His car, the officer, the tension, and her voice had cut through the fog like a siren. For the first time, Perry hesitated. Kennedy felt it, the crack in the rhythm, the break in control. Perry's head jerked toward the voice, eyes narrowing against the bright beam. "Back up," he barked. "This is a police matter." The woman didn't move. Her voice was steady, louder now. "This is abuse of power." Her name was Carrara Simmons, and she hadn't planned to be here. She was a high school English teacher from Brookings, on her way home from her best friend's wedding in Grants Pass, tired, dressed in a soft blue bridesmaid's dress and a windbreaker. She had been driving cautiously down the same stretch of Redwood Highway when she saw the flashing lights. She could have kept driving, but something, maybe instinct, stopped her. Maybe a lifetime of teaching kids to speak up had told her to pull over. Now, standing in the damp grass with her phone steady and her heart pounding, she refused to look away. Purdy took a step toward her, his hand still hovering near his sidearm. "Ma'am, I'm giving you a lawful order. Step back and stop recording," he demanded. Kara's reply was instant. I'm well within my rights. Oregon's a one-party consent state, and I'm not interfering. I'm documenting. Her tone didn't shake, not once. Kennedy seized the moment, his voice rising not in panic, but commanding. You're being recorded, officer, every word, every movement. The entire world can see this now. Purdy's posture stiffened, his eyes darting from Kennedy to Kara and back. The gun wasn't drawn, but his knuckles were white against the grip. The flashlight in his other hand trembled slightly, its beam wobbling across the windshield. Kara took a step closer, not into danger, but into the frame. Senator Kennedy, are you okay? She asked. He didn't look at her directly, still too risky, but he nodded once. I am now. Something shifted in the air, the predator's confidence. The unchecked momentum Purdy had ridden for the last few minutes was slipping, not gone, but shaken. Mom, this is your last warning, he snapped, though there was less bite in the words now, more noise than threat. Are you sure you want to go down this road? Kara said, raising her phone slightly, because you're not just messing with a man in a car anymore. You're messing with the camera and the public. Purdy turned back to Kennedy, jaw flexing. His hand lingered near the holster, but he didn't move. Kennedy kept his hands on the wheel, visible and calm. Officer, he said, his voice low and firm, you're dangerously close to crossing the line you can't uncross. Call your supervisor. Let's end this professionally. Silence followed, the kind that doesn't soothe, but builds, heavy and charged. Kennedy could hear his own heartbeat now, could feel the weight of every second ticking past. He wasn't thinking about politics anymore, not about policy or polls or perception. He was thinking about survival. And then something incredible happened. Kara stepped forward again, not recklessly but deliberately, and said, I've got a live stream going now, just for your information. It was a bluff. She wasn't streaming, but Purdy didn't know that. The officer's eyes flicked to her phone again, his posture changing just a fraction. Kennedy saw it, a beat of uncertainty, a stutter in his dominance. It wasn't over, not yet, but the balance was shifting, and for the first time since the stop began. Senator Kennedy knew he wasn't alone. The silence had stretched so thin it felt like it could snap. Senator Kennedy stayed still, hands on the wheel, eyes locked on Officer Wade Purdy, who now stood at the driver's side door, fingers still hovering over his holstered weapon. Just behind them, Kara Simmons' phone continued recording, the red light blinking like a lifeline in the dark. Then came the sound of tires crunching gravel. Headlights cut through the fog behind the patrol car. A second cruiser had pulled up, its engine still humming. The door swung open, and another officer stepped out, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s. His uniform crisp, his expression unreadable. Officer Mario Hale, of the Josephine County Sheriff's Department, he announced, approaching, with a purposeful stride, not yet knowing what he'd just walked into. Everything all right here? Hale asked, glancing first at Purdy, then at the car. Purdy spoke before Kennedy could. Driver refused to comply, non-cooperative, repeatedly ignored lawful orders. Hale gave a slow nod, but something in his body language signaled caution. He looked toward the sedan, saw Kennedy sitting upright, calm, motionless. Then his gaze shifted to Kara. And who's she? Civilian, Purdy snapped, interfering with a lawful stop. I told her to back off. I'm not interfering, Kara said sharply, stepping forward just enough for her voice to carry. I'm documenting, and I have it all on video, your partner putting his hand on his weapon, threatening to pull a sitting U.S. Senator out of his car without cause. Hale blinked. Wait, what? Kennedy spoke, clear and firm. I'm Senator John Kennedy, Louisiana. I've identified myself. I've complied with every request. This officer has refused to give a reason for the stop and escalated the situation with implied force. You're here now. I'm asking you to supervise the scene appropriately before it gets worse. Hale froze. The title Senator registered. So did the red recording light on Kara's phone. Senator, he began, hesitating. Kara cut in. Want to see the video? Without waiting for permission, she stepped closer and angled her phone toward Hale, tapping play on the clip she just captured. On screen, the flashlight beam, the stiff body language, Purdy's words, the unmistakable snap of a holster. Hale watched, his jaw tightening. Then he looked at Purdy. Wade, I need you to take a step back. Purdy's expression twisted instantly. You serious? You're taking his side? This isn't about sides, Hale said. This is about protocol. No, it's about respect, Purdy snapped. You think some politician gets to wave a fancy ID and start calling the shots out here? Kara instinctively raised her phone again. Hale's voice deepened. Step back, Wade. Now. Purdy didn't move. His hand lowered not away from the weapon, but closer. Closer than it had ever been. The world shrank in an instant. Kennedy felt every molecule of tension in the airlock into place. And then Purdy's thumb slid beneath the holster strap. Don't, Hale said sharply, lifting one hand with his palm out. Take your hand off the weapon. Purdy's eyes burned. Locked on Kennedy. Kennedy didn't blink. The senator's voice was a force of gravity, low, calm, immovable. Wade, think very carefully about what you're doing. Purdy's breath was shallow, his chest rising and falling in short bursts. His hand still hovered. Put your hand down. Hale warned again, louder now. Or I swear to God, I'll draw on you myself. That was the moment, the one where it could have gone either way. But Kennedy, his voice like stone, spoke again. You have 10 seconds to choose your badge and your integrity, or your ego and the end of your career. Purdy's jaw clenched. Then, slowly, hesitantly, his hand slid off the weapon. His shoulders stayed squared, but something inside him cracked. Kennedy saw it. So did Kara. So did Hale. Hale let out a breath he'd clearly been holding. Thank you, he said. Though it wasn't gratitude, it was relief, barely. Purdy muttered something under his breath. Kara stepped closer. Say that louder for the camera. Purdy glared at her, but didn't respond. Kennedy finally moved, his hand leaving the wheel to rest on the armrest. His voice carried again, not angry, but resolute. This doesn't end here. There are eyes on us now. And when there are eyes, there's truth. Kara nodded slowly, and truth's got a long memory. Behind them, the red and blue lights still pulsed across the trees. A quiet siren echoed faintly from somewhere farther down the road, another unit approaching. Hale stepped back, hand on his radio. I need a supervisor on site. Now. Kennedy leaned back in his seat and exhaled. The fog on the windows clearing with each breath. The threat had passed. But the story had only just begun. The third cruiser arrived like a hammer falling. Its sirens were off, but the lights flashed with urgency as it pulled in behind the other patrol cars. The engine cut. The door opened with purpose, and from the driver's side stepped Lieutenant Nicole Mercer, a seasoned officer with 30 years in the Josephine County Sheriff's Department. She was in her late 50s, compact in build but radiating command with every step. Her silver lieutenant's bars gleamed under the strobing lights. She didn't hesitate, didn't pause to observe. She walked straight toward the scene with a face that said, I want answers now. Her eyes darted between the figures. Senator Kennedy, still seated in his car, calm but tense. Officer Hale, standing off to the side with his jaw tight. Kara Simmons, phone still raised and recording. And finally, Officer Purdy, standing rigid near the driver's side, sweat dotting his brow. Hand no longer near his weapon, but fist clenched at his sides. What's going on here? Mercer demanded, her voice like gravel and authority. Kennedy spoke first. Lieutenant Mercer, I'm Senator John Kennedy. I was pulled over without cause by Officer Purdy. He refused to explain. The stop ordered me out of the vehicle and placed his hand on his firearm in a threatening manner. I complied fully and identified myself. The incident was recorded. Mercer's eyes narrowed as she asked, You're a U.S. Senator? Yes, ma'am. He replied, nodding toward Kara, and that camera has the entire encounter. Kara stepped forward, stating, I'd have footage of Officer Purdy putting his hand on his gun, yelling at the senator to get out without reason, and refusing to explain the stop. It's all here, audio and video. He tried to open the car door, but I warned him I was filming. Mercer turned toward Purdy, who visibly tensed. Is that true? She asked him directly. Purdy shifted uncomfortably. He was being non-compliant, refused to exit the vehicle after I gave a direct order. He defended. Mercer raised one eyebrow. Did you state a lawful reason for the stop? Silence followed. Purdy's lips parted, but no answer came, just the faint buzz of the emergency lights and the sound of Kara's camera rolling. Kennedy interjected, calm but firm. Lieutenant, this officer escalated a peaceful encounter without cause, ignored my credentials, and threatened me with his firearm. That is a criminal act, not just misconduct. Mercer didn't blink. She turned to Kara. Play it. Kara tapped the screen, and the audio played clearly, the aggressive tone, the refusal to answer questions, and the unmistakable click of a holster snap. When the clip ended, Mercer gave no speech, no hesitation. She turned to Officer Hale. "You were on site as secondary. Why didn't you intervene earlier?" Hale replied, eyes cast downward. "I stepped in once the weapon was near, but I didn't stop the initial escalation." Mercer nodded once, then looked back at Purdy. "Cuff him." The word struck like a gunshot. Purdy exploded. "You've got to be kidding me. You're taking their word over mine over a damn video." Mercer's face hardened. "That's not a damn video. That's evidence. Your conduct is disgraceful. You're under arrest for misconduct and threatening a civilian under color of law. Turn around." Purdy growled, "You'll regret this," as Hale reluctantly stepped forward with the cuffs. Kennedy watched in silence as Purdy was spun around, wrists bound, and read his rights. But Mercer wasn't done. She looked back to Hale. "You're on administrative leave pending review. You may not have started this, but you failed to control it when you arrived." Hale looked stunned, his mouth opening to protest, but he simply nodded as the two officers were walked toward separate cruisers. Kara let out a quiet breath, but didn't lower her phone. Not until both were inside. Only then did she let her arm drop. Kennedy stepped out of the vehicle slowly, his back stiff, his shoulders finally relaxed. Mercer approached him. "Senator, are you injured?" "No," he replied, voice level. "But that could have gone another way, and for a lot of people. It often does." Mercer nodded. "I'll file the incident and notify Internal Affairs. This will go to the state." Kara walked over to Kennedy, her voice quiet but clear. "I didn't expect this when I pulled over. I just couldn't drive past." He looked at her, genuinely moved. "You didn't just witness something, Kara. You changed it." Under the flashing lights of 3 patrol cars, with the fog finally starting to lift from Redwood Highway, it felt as if, for a moment, the high ground had been reached by sunrise. The fog had lifted from Redwood Highway, but online, the storm had just begun. Kara Simmons' video grainy, shaky, but crystal clear in its message was already spreading across social media platforms. The caption was short, blunt, and impossible to ignore. Senator Kennedy threatened at gunpoint by rogue cop. Within hours, it had racked up millions of views. By noon, it was being dissected frame by frame on CNN, CBS, and Fox on one screen. The red Senate ID gleamed under flashlight glare on another. Purdy's hand hovered over his gun like a powder keg waiting for a spark. The public's reaction was swift and relentless. Reporters camped outside the Josephine County Sheriff's Department, demanding answers. Protesters gathered with signs reading "No badge above the law," and "Who protects us from the protected?" But for Senator John Kennedy, this wasn't just about viral footage. It was about what came next. 2 days later, over 200 people filled the Eugene Community Center. Worn folding chairs lined up row after row under flickering overhead lights. Some wore campaign shirts, others came straight from work. But all were there because something about that night on the highway had shaken them, maybe for the first time, maybe not. Kennedy stood at the front behind a plain wooden podium. He didn't wear a tie. His sleeves were rolled up. His voice, when it came, didn't thunder, it carried. "I had a camera on me that night," he began, "and I had power behind my name, but most Americans don't." The room went quiet. "I want you to know I wasn't brave. I was lucky. Lucky someone stopped. Lucky someone recorded. But that shouldn't be the difference between life and death." He paused. Faces in the crowd watched him, not like a politician, but like someone who'd been through something real. "Let's stop pretending this was isolated," Kennedy said, "because I've read the letters, I've sat with the families, I've heard the stories. What happened to me wasn't new. It was just finally caught on camera." A murmur rippled across the room. Kennedy turned slightly and gestured to the side. "Kara Simmons is here tonight, the woman who made sure that video existed. She's not an activist. She's not a staffer. She's a teacher, and she stood up when it mattered." The applause was instant and strong as Kara stepped forward. Gripping the microphone with both hands, she took a breath. "My brother was pulled over 3 years ago. He wasn't speeding. He wasn't aggressive. He complied with every instruction, but the officer humiliated him, searched his car, called him names. He came home angry, broken." Her voice tightened. "We had no proof, no video, just his word, and that was never enough." Now the room was silent again. Kara scanned the audience, then turned to Kennedy. "I saw what was happening on that highway, and I thought, not again, not this time." Her voice trembled, just a little, If we all keep driving past injustice, nothing changes. The applause this time was quieter, but heavier, like respect. Kennedy returned to the podium. We can't legislate morality, but we can legislate accountability. He outlined his proposal: mandatory body cameras for all on-duty officers with federal enforcement, independent civilian oversight boards in every county receiving federal policing grants, immediate removal and review of any officer who draws a weapon during a nonviolent stop without cause, and national public access to misconduct records. He didn't sugarcoat the fight ahead. There are people who will say I'm turning against law enforcement. I'm not. I'm standing with the 99% who wear the badge the right way by calling out the 1% who make them less safe. Someone in the back stood up and clapped, then another, and another. It wasn't a standing ovation. It was a rising one. When the event ended, Kennedy and Kara walked out into the parking lot side by side. The Oregon air was cool and clean, but the flash of cameras still came hot and fast from reporters waiting outside. "Senator, what now?" One called out. "Will you be testifying?" asked another. Kennedy didn't answer right away. He turned to Kara. "You still have that flash drive?" She reached into her bag and handed it to him. "The full video, in case they try to spin it," she said. He nodded, pocketing it, then looked back toward the crowd. "I'm not here to spin anything," he said, his voice low, barely above a whisper. "I'm here to make sure people are finally seen." Then he turned toward the cameras, paused, and spoke clearly. "This was just the beginning. If people out there feel like they have no one standing with them, then I will." Sometimes the difference between silence and justice is just one voice that chooses to speak. What happened that night wasn't just about a senator or a badge. It was about all of us. Would you have stopped? Would you have filmed? Let us know what you think in the comments. If this story moved you, share it. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that remind us why we still care. Thank you for being here.